The following are clipped portions of discussions about homeschool registration in the state of Michigan. Board member Nikki Snyder introduces a resolution that the Michigan State Board of Education recognize the privacy and constitutional right for parents to homeschool their children and students' right to privacy. Here's why. On January 10th, 2024, Michigan State Board of Education Superintendent Michael F. Rice sent a letter to the legislature. In this letter, one item that he requested includes mandatory registration of every child, including homeschooled children. Here you see the letter, and here's the portion that refers to homeschoolers. Notice the word buckets. This will come up in a quote from Nikki Snyder in just a few minutes. The letter states enrolling every Michigan child. Currently, Michigan enrolls students in traditional public school districts and public school academies, PSAs. In recent years, our understanding of private and parochial school student enrollments has grown, depending on the interaction of private and parochial schools with particular state-funded programs. For the safety of all students, it is important to enroll students in their following four buckets: public schools, including charter schools, private schools, parochial schools, homeschools. Having a record of all children enrolled in these four buckets would provide an understanding of the children not currently enrolled in any learning environment. The issue of missing children is a national problem with potential negative consequences for too many children. The letter goes on and talks about several other things, but we're focusing on the aspect of homeschools and registration. So in the following clips, you will see from the recent board meeting, Nikki Snyder introducing her resolution. Here is the morning session opening comments starting at video clip time 6:28.
Thank you. Does anybody else have anything else to add to the agenda?
Mr.
Ms.
Chairman.
Snyder, thank you very much.
I would like to amend the agenda to add a resolution on educational freedom and privacy. I'll read it into the record.
We have a motion by Ms. Snyder, support by Mr. McMillan. Ms. Snyder, if you could read it into the record, please.
Whereas freedom from government oversight and regulation when government-funded education is not the schooling of choice is paramount to a society committed to the fundamental right of parents to determine and direct the care, teaching, and education of their children. Whereas any student not enrolled in public education should have the reasonable expectation of privacy and not be subject to governmental intrusion through obtaining personal information that is constitutionally protected. Therefore, be it resolved, the State Board of Education strongly opposes the registration of any individual not willfully registered in public education and honors and respects their constitutional right to privacy.
Thank you very much, Ms. Snyder. Any other discussion?
I would just say it speaks for itself, and I hope that we can discuss it.
Very good. Thank you very much. Any other discussion? Hearing and seeing none. Ms. Evans, a roll call vote, please.
Bullock?
No.
Lipton?
No.
McMillan?
Yes.
Pritchett?
No.
Pugh?
No.
Robinson?
No.
Snyder?
Yes.
Tilly?
No.
Motion passed.
The motion to add a resolution recognizing parents' right to homeschool and students' right to privacy failed. Dana Nessel recently charged two couples for alleged abuse of their foster children. Nessel said the children were homeschooled. This is actually a breakdown of the foster system and the social workers that are supposed to be keeping tabs on those homes. This is not a case of all homeschoolers being abusive for their children. These are the board members who approved Dana Nessel's desire for registration and unwarranted home search of homeschool families. They are all Democrats. Marshall Bullock, treasurer, said no. Ellen Coggin Lipton, co-vice president, said no. Judith Pritchett, Ph.D., secretary, said no. Tiffany D. Tilley, co-vice president, said no. Mitchell Robinson, Ph.D., said no. Pamela Pugh, Dr. Ph. M.S. president, said no. In support of the resolution that the board would recognize homeschool autonomy, these are the board members who oppose Dana Nessel's desire for registration and unwarranted home search of homeschool families. They are all Republicans. Tom McMillan said yes. Nikki Snyder said yes. Notice that both Tom and Nikki's terms expire in 2025. These are the next two that need to be reinstated in the next election for the Michigan Board of Education. In the afternoon session, the closing comments are made, and we start at video clip time, 3 hours, 32 minutes, and 19 seconds. Here, Mr. Miller begins to raise his objections to the homeschool registration. Others give their comments. This is a lengthy clip, but you need to listen to the whole thing.
Board members, comments by state board members. Mr. McMillan.
Okay, so this whole and I could have brought it up because you brought it up during your superintendent report, but this whole homeschooling thing is really quite disturbing. And one of the things that disturbs me about this is the disingenuousness of the discussion. Because we have people like the Senate Education Committee Chair, Dana Polhanke, saying that when asked about increasing regulations beyond registration, she said, not on my watch. Well, we got Atty General Nessel that says that she wants to do it because the foster care system didn't do their job, and apparently homeschool parents, there was some abuse going on at a homeschool home, or that actually it sounds like the foster care system, but certainly a mere registration, a list of people, is not going to have anything to do or will not help prevent what Atty General Nessel is talking about. So she's already kind of said the quiet part out loud. She basically said, we want this list so that we can have unwarranted home entry without a warrant, warrantless home entry into homeschool, into this particular targeted group. And we want to be able to go in there, and there's a lot of bad things happening all around the state potentially in some houses, but we have a legal system that says you have to have a warrant before you go in. However, because of this one instance, some in the state want to be able to barge in and bust the door down, and I'm not being, it's not hyperbolic. I mean, if they knock on the door and they say, no, I don't want you to come in, and there's all kind of reasons not to have them in. I hope I'm not the only one, but, there's, to have the government come into your house, I don't know, there's a book called 3 Felonies a Day. Can't remember the guy's name that wrote it, but I mean, if the government wants to get you, they're gonna find something. And so there's just, without warrant, they shouldn't be coming into your house. And so I just think that it's gonna go beyond registration. That, there's either they're either naive or they're being disingenuous for anybody to say, all we want to do is have a list. It's going to go significantly further than that. They're going to either want to know exactly what's being taught, or they're going to want entry into the houses. And so I think that this is a real problem. I guess I just wish that the debate would be sincere, because we have one of the leaders in the education area saying, I promise you on my watch it'll never happen, and that's only a few years. But we know that in other instances, registration leads to confiscation, registration leads to getting, rounding up. I mean, registration is the first step, and it's not the only step. And I wish that the debate were clear that, it's going to be a lot further than registration. The desire that the Attorney General has already articulated said that she wants warrantless home entry into this targeted group of people, and I think it's dangerous. I think that could be any. The next group could be next. I mean, who knows who the next group is? That there's a target for warrantless home entry. So that's my initial comment, or my comments on this whole, some push by some people to simply register so we know where they are. I think that's completely disingenuous or naive, one or the other, but we know it doesn't stop there. Anybody that has half a brain realizes it doesn't just stop there.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. McMillan. Ms. Tilley.
I just want to, because you mentioned the foster youth, I just want to say that this has been an issue in the community that has been talked about for a while, about being able to track them, because they're bouncing from schools to homes, and sometimes there's issues where they've run away because of things that have happened. They want to better track them. I don't know about the other end of it, but as far as with the foster youth, that is a real issue.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Tilley. Ms. Snyder.
I'll just echo what you guys both have said, and I wish we could separate them so that that problem is solved and they do have access to an education just like everybody else, which we've been talking about. My resolution that I presented this morning, I wish that we would consider it. I don't think it's an issue that's going away. I think students have a constitutional right and reasonable expectation to privacy. I do. I've been very clear, too, and forthright with the fact that, you know, it's oppressive to ask a student that has left the public education system for whatever reason they've left to then ask them to register with that same system. We wouldn't do that in any other facet of society. And so to give people the freedom to exercise choices that work best for them is extremely important. Just because we're one of 11 states doesn't mean the other 39 are doing it the right way. I don't think we need to approach it from that perspective. And I just really want to push back on things we've talked about at this table. Public education is not safer than homeschooling, and that means it's incumbent upon us to address that. There are multiple pieces of evidence that we've discussed here at the board table time and time again that we do nothing about, that prove public education needs a safety overhaul before we can claim that homeschool leaves students more vulnerable. So sexual abuse epidemic, where we refuse to register school officials who've assaulted students so they can be rehired elsewhere. Being concerned with requiring BTAM training, which we talked about recently at the local level due to resources it would take the department to audit them. And yet here we are thinking we have the resources to audit every family's educational choice in the state. That's unreasonable. And countless stories that violate a safe learning environment across the state, which I don't think we're done with hearing yet. So when you use the words disingenuous, yes, I think it is very disingenuous to suggest that we need to audit families and their educational choices because of safety, especially private and parochial schools, right? What ends up happening in other states that register students in these buckets, as you say, is we end up overseeing their curriculum. They're making specific choices to not be in public education so that they can access a curriculum we're not choosing to administer to them. And there's nothing wrong with that. But you start to ask them to jump through hoops, and you're really interfering and discriminating against their right to exercise educational freedom. So, I don't think the topic is going away, and I certainly don't think that safety in public schools is something that we should shy away from. I think we should be spending our time, energy, and effort in that, because that's what we have a constitutional authority over.
Thank you, Ms. Snyder. Ms. Lipton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have been called naive by many people. I certainly would like to believe I have more than half a brain. But I would like to point out, since this is something that, an issue that I dealt with as far back as when I was in the legislature, when there was an instance of a young woman and I think her younger brother that were found in a freezer in East Lansing. And I was asked to carry a bill regarding notification of the school district. It was not registration, and I think that the use of the word registration is being used in a particular way, but it involved notification of a local school district of a desire of a family to homeschool, which by the way is considered optional right now. I first became aware of the strong feelings on both sides of that issue for the first time. I would hope my colleagues around this table would understand that there are strong feelings on both sides. There are as many victim advocate organizations that feel very strongly that a notification process, as is used in 39 to 40 other states, can also be done here, and it would not be overly burdensome. I also became very much aware that there are strong feelings that disagree with that. But I certainly think that it is the basis for a robust democracy to have a difference of opinions, and to certainly not belittle those that have different feelings as being naive, although, as I said, I have been called naive by many, but certainly not half-brained. And it is an issue that has strong feelings on both sides, and I am certain that the people in the state will have their feelings heard as they have in the past, and if the legislature deems it to be appropriate to have a notification process, then it will become the law, and if they don't, then it won't.
Thank you very much, Ms. Lipton. Dr. Pritchett.
Thank you. First of all, I wanted to thank Tiffany for making arrangements for Ken Coleman today. I learned lots and appreciate the fact that you made that effort for Black History Month. And I want to commend all of you for the conversation that we have had regarding my leap and the executive recommendation for the budget. I think all good, questions. But I'm reminded a friend of mine who I counsel with quite frequently always says, when things like this are somewhat complex, take your time. I'm not saying ignore it. Time, make sure you have all your facts, and come together again and see what you've been able to find out. So that's my comments on today's conversation. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Pritchett. Any other board member?
Mr. Chairman.
We have three others that haven't had a first bite. I just want to make sure that nobody's still revving up before you rev down, Mr. McMillan. Please, Mr. Bo.
Valentine's Day to the ladies.
Happy Valentine's Day. Always spreading the love. Always spreading the
I don't know
love.
about all this other stuff. What about me? I love you too.
And then
Happy
get to
Valentine's
celebrate
Day.
Valentine's Day too.
Lot of love around the table. Mr. McMillan, would you like to give a benediction?
Well, I would just like to make it clear what I was saying and what I was not saying. I certainly understand that people may think that a registration is a good idea. I am simply saying that the idea that having a list of people is not going to stop what goes on in those houses. And I will say that I'm certain, or quite certain, I haven't seen any studies, but people who are homeschooling, I doubt there's very much crime at all going on comparatively to the broader society in a homeschool households. But if there is something not going on well in a household, a simple list is not going to do anything. Simply registering or notifying anybody who did something wrong in whatever instance you want to mention, requiring that family to notify or be put on a list does nothing. That's all I'm saying, is that the idea that it's going to increase safety by registering or notifying is not the end. The end would be, and we need to be able to break down the door if we want to, or force entry, or come in and check on the family, check on the kids. That's what is desired. And for anybody to say that registration, having a list, that's all we want. We don't, that's going to do anything. It's not going to do anything. So let's make it clear that that is not the end. That's not all that's desired, because having a list will not stop anything from happening. That's all I'm saying.
to add to that. It isn't going to do anything because we see, again, going back to safety as we define it as a reasoning or a foundation for why we would do this. Okay, Title IX is supposed to protect young girls and young women in public education from sexual assault. Yet in my own home school district, we recently had an administrator that was let go from his job because he didn't adequately report a rape on campus. We don't realize this right now, but in Downriver, there's a school district with a female teacher that has had sexual acts with many members on the JV basketball team. And yet that's not being discussed because it's all handled behind closed doors. And we don't deal with the problems where they need to be dealt with. And so freedom in being able to make a decision that's best for you without your government tracking you is extremely important. It is extremely, extremely important. So safety for all families that are making the decisions that are best for students is important. And it's not like a family in these school districts that are dealing with that can just pick up and leave their local school district or leave where they live. If they choose to homeschool, they should be able to choose to homeschool.
Yes, ma'am. Ms.
I just
Tilley.
want to say,
I'll forward it to you.
yeah, please do. But I just want to say, too, that everybody's being tracked already. They have our social security numbers, birth certificates. Everybody's already tracked.
That's why we need to fight who owns our data. In our personal
Dr. Pugh, you are the last board member at this point. Because we're 5:07. We can go to Applebee's and I'll treat everybody to chicken fingers, okay, afterwards. But
I'm saying.
But at some point, the free flow conversation has flowed pretty freely. Please.
I think maybe that this has been said before, but just in case it hasn't, I don't want it to be misconstrued. And I think that we have to be very careful that those of us who are proponents of having children registered, that we are not saying that homeschooling is unsafe. We are not saying that we want to do anything beyond making sure that all children can be accounted for in the day. Ms. Lopez, who came to the end of the table, was telling me about a child who, not in homeschool, but somehow over virtual or something, became a child who was missing. We want to be able to know where that child should be, any child. And that is what this is about. And there's been a lot that has been read into what I am saying when I say that I believe that all children should at least be registered, so that we know that they're in a safe space. And again, being in homeschooling, if someone chooses to homeschool their child, they have that right. And definitely not at all saying that homeschoolers are unsafe.
Thank you, board members. Two things before I announce the schedule for the next 3 months. First of all, if any of you know of a crime against a child or a perceived crime against a child, you have a responsibility to report that to local police. That's the first thing. And the second thing is that the proposal around every child having an educational home is just that. Every child should be educated somewhere. Public, private, parochial, homeschool. Every child should have an educational home. I'm agnostic as to what that is. I'm a public school educator, yes. But I'm agnostic as to where mom, dad, grandma, or grandma decides to educate his or her child. But at the end of the day, every child should receive an education, without exception. And the society has a responsibility to make sure that every child is receiving an education. without exception.